My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together. So said Desmond Tutu, a leader who was intimately familiar with the pain and heartbreak of division. Throughout his life, Archbishop Tutu crossed racial, gender, socioeconomic, and political boundaries to carry out a message of unity in South Africa and beyond. Archbishop Tutu's life and work are a living example of today's reading in Ephesians. Archbishop Tutu, known as the Arch in South Africa to those who knew him well, was all too aware of the impacts of division, being raised in the politically violent and authoritarian and explicitly racist apartheid system. From his humble beginnings as the son of a principal, the Arch initially pursued a career as a teacher, but moved away from the profession in silent protest against the Bantu Act, which, among other things, mandated a racially separate school system. He entered the Anglican priesthood, moved to England, and continued his studies. Throughout his career, he was an exceptional visionary for inclusion. Rare at the time, he invited women to serve communion among men and worked to replace the use of male pronouns with gender-neutral ones within liturgy. He was an incredible early champion for gay rights, appointing gay priests to senior positions and famously stating, "If God, as they say, is homophobic, I wouldn't worship that God." After the apartheid, though, is when Tutu demonstrated the type of radical unity we heard about today. The Arch led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a powerful body instated by Nelson Mandela to provide space for both Black and white South Africans to give accounts of their sufferings during the apartheid, speak their truth, no matter how painful. It was also a space where the perpetrators could testify, express remorse, and seek amnesty. Desmond Tutu knew the power of healing and the role of storytelling in uplifting one's humanity. He knew that we can only be human together because my humanity relies on your recognition of it, and your humanity relies on my recognition of it. But how do we go about recognizing each other's humanity? How do we achieve the type of radical unity that the Arch sought in South Africa? Paul's letter to the Ephesians tells us how we get there, through Jesus and through his message of love and universal acceptance. To take us back to this moment, this morning's reading comes to us from a time when Paul was a missionary in the ancient city of Ephesus, which was a large city in ancient Greece, renowned as an important place of worship of the Greek gods. This is near where the Temple of Artemis stood, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, representing the stronghold of polytheistic worship. Paul wrote the Ephesians after a years-long presence in the city and after being imprisoned by the Romans. This letter has 4 chapters, and the first half of the letter, chapters 1 through 3, weave in a strong message of unity. Paul is trying to unite 2 groups of people who had long been separated along cultural and religious lines. The Jewish people, whom he identifies as the we who were chosen, and the Gentile residents of Ephesus, whom he says were once far away and are now brought near. This is not a new promise, as this concept mirrors what we were told by the prophet Isaiah. Peace, peace to him that is far off, and to him that is near, saith the Lord, and I will heal him. It is through Jesus, through his death that we just experienced in the past few Sundays. Christ, through his suffering, his blood, brought us close to God And the us I refer to, as we all know, is all of us. We are all children of God. We are all now close to God through the Holy Spirit, a gift from Jesus, our rock, and the unifier of all people, under a common message of grace and peace. During a time of great uncertainty, from the climate crisis to the devastation and unspeakable daily tragedies in Gaza, we need a message of unity now more than ever. We need to understand how we can come together to bring forward a more just and peaceful world, a world that leverages our strengths, respects our individualism, but also weaves a oneness together into something more powerful than each of us can achieve individually. We desperately need the power of true radical unity. And yet, there's also a humility we feel within that sense of unity. We are all the same. We are all human. We are all wanting to be recognized as human and all deserving of that recognition. We are also all here to learn about how we are loved in the same merciful way, forgiven with the same grace, and welcomed home by our shepherd as sheep within a flock. How can we reconcile this need for oneness and individuality with a deep worldwide need for radical unity? Over the years, my dad and I have had our fair share of theological and philosophical debates. What started out as my incredulity and wavering faith turned into me bringing home messages of the radical power of Jesus' love. And more recently, another such conversation was prompted from an unusual source. A few weeks ago, my dad showed me a shape that he had made using a laser cutter. If you know anything about my father, this is a very classic move. He'll bring home or construct an innocuous object, and us kids, or grandkids now, have to guess what it is. But this, he told me, was an astonishing discovery. And when I learned what it was, I felt it provided a wonderful illustration of what this reading is bringing forth, and an answer to our earlier question. The tiles that you picked up on your way in are courtesy of my dad. These tiles are but humble shapes. Each one is identical. Each has 13 sides and is made up of 8 pieces of a hexagon. Some say it looks like a hat, some say a shirt. Truth be told, at first glance, I thought it was a piece of Margot's magnetic doll toy that had gone missing. Suffice it to say, but a humble shape. And yet this shape that you hold in your hand rocked the world of plane geometry. In 2022, geometry hobbyist and retired print designer Dave Schmid was playing around with software, as one does during retirement, and discovered a shape that could be arranged in an aperiodic or non-repeating pattern in an infinite space. In other words, you can completely cover a surface with this tile in such a way that the pattern never repeats for infinity. Scientists had been searching for this shape that they had named the Einstein tile. Not named for Albert Einstein, as I first thought, but for the German, one stone. Because I'm a visual person, I wanted to share one such configuration of this pattern that Joy is now handing out. The images on the paper are of the tiles in various phases of building. From the pictures on the page, you can see that each tile is identical. But because of its features, when each tile is placed within this configuration, also known as a tessellation, each time a tile is placed, the structure or tessellation changes. So the orientation of each individual tile, though identical, has the potential to shift the future placement and the entire pattern as a whole. As my dad was explaining all this to me, I realized that this humble shape, that to my initial eyes was a meaningless piece of plywood, had quite literally endless possibilities. So how does a hat shape that revolutionized the world of plane geometry relate to this morning's reading? The letter from Paul to the Ephesians contains a few verses towards the end, calling for us to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, how infinite it is, and once full to the brim with this love, to proclaim it. But not all in the same orientation, not in the same way, but with the many gifts bestowed upon us as apostles, as prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. We need these perspectives for the people of God to bring forward this message of infinite love. Yes, we are all human, and yes, we are all worthy of the same infinite, merciful love, but we do not fill the same space in this universe. We bring our own orientations, our own skills to the table, our own identities. And recognizing that individual history, those individual stories, pains, sufferings, hearing them is how we begin to fit together, each playing a unique and pivotal role in weaving the living representation of the story of Jesus' infinite love. In many cases, as the saying goes, history is written by the victor. But that is not the message we hear today. And that was not Desmond Tutu's message in 1990. Archbishop Tutu knew that to achieve true reconciliation, to achieve radical unity, we needed to hear Black stories and white stories, not to diminish the wrong and horrible nature of a racially segregated and oppressive society. But in his own words, true reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the pain, the hurt, the truth. He knew this was not about forgetting the awful past of the apartheid, but about expressing and telling and hearing individual stories and experiences to start to heal and move towards true unity. Paul also shows us a different way to declare victory in his letter to the Ephesians. To cross racial, socioeconomic, sexual orientation, gender lines as a means of bringing our collective humanity together as we embrace, uplift, and celebrate our unique orientations and contributions to this existence. And so, alone, we are but single, somewhat weird-looking shapes. But together, my friends, together with our own unique orientations in space and in time, the possibilities in this world are truly limitless. And only together can we carry out Christ's vision of a new just place, a place where all of humanity is celebrated and recognized. May it be so.